Welcome to this episode of ArtsAbly in Conversation. My name is Diane Collin. I am a woman with short hair, blue eyes, and glasses, and today I wear a black top. Behind me is a dance studio with gray walls, tall mirrors, and spotlights. This series presents artists, academics, and project leaders who dedicate their time and energy to a better accessibility for people with disabilities in the arts. You can find more of these conversations on our website, artsably.com, which is spelled ArtsAbly.com. Today, ArtsAbly is in conversation with Alexia McLean, a saxophonist, an educator, and a disability rights advocate from Houston, Texas. You can find the resources mentioned by Alexia McLean during this episode on ArtsAbly's website in the blog section. Welcome to this new episode of ArtsAbly in Conversation. Today, I am with Alexia McLean, who is a saxophonist, an educator, and a disability rights advocate from Houston, Texas. Welcome, Alexia.
Thank you so much, Diane, for having me. I'm excited to be here. So as you've already indicated, my name is Alexia McLean. I'm a disabled musician, woodwind specialist, and a passionate arts educator, especially now with disability rights, accessibility. I use she, her pronouns. Visually, I am a light-skinned Hispanic and Filipino woman with curly, short-length hair, wearing glasses, and I am currently wearing a kind of a dark rose pink top today. I'm joining you from my home office in Texas, where behind me, you'll see my virtual background that states my full name in the top corner and my personal website, alexiamclean.com. And just a quick introduction about me. My background weaves together performance, education, arts administration all together. I taught students from across K through 12 and beyond, to be honest. College, community programs, serving in roles from private woodwind instructors to elementary music teachers to band clinician. Feels like I've done everything under the sun at this point. My career path has taken me from higher education music admissions to concert stages to classrooms across that K through 12 spectrum. And I bring all those experiences to how I advocate for inclusion, creative agency, and equity in the arts. I think that's really important. I think that'll also be a good segue into what I'm doing right now, artistically and professionally. So right now, I'm wrapping up my year as an elementary music teacher in Houston, Texas, where I have worked with students from kindergarten all the way through fifth grade. I teach a different grade every class, and woof, that was a learning curve at first, that's for sure. I have done quite a few performances with them so far, and it's been such a gratifying experience. I did a holiday concert with my third through fifth graders this past December. I actually just did a community performance this past weekend with my fifth graders, where they got to play on a community stage in front of people they've never met before, which to us sounds like a norm, but to them was a new experience. And they got to play ukulele and they got to sing Stand By Me by Ben King, which also was a new song to them. So got to teach them the oldies but goodies. And I'm also currently working on a spring musical with my kindergarten through second grade, and that is coming up next Thursday. So I am in a whirlwind of finishing things up. I think like every single educator in probably all over. We are very much looking forward to the summer because things are just wrapping up very quickly. Outside the classroom, I currently serve as the Director of Mentorship for the North American Saxophone Alliance's Committee on Gender Equity. So in that role, I coordinate professional development, community building, one-on-one mentoring for emerging artists across the United States and in Canada. Um, and artistically, I am continuing to perform and teach privately with a focus on woodwind instruction. I'm trying to lean more into collaborative creative projects to highlight accessibility and inclusion in music, but it's also just a really nice opportunity to play too.
Well, that's a lot of things.
Yeah, I know. It's just a lot of, it's like, let's talk about me in, under 90 seconds, right?
Well, let's go back to the beginning. What made
Yeah.
you start saxophone?
What made me start saxophone?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, that is a really fun story. So when I was in sixth grade, I there was a surplus of extra sixth graders at my middle school that I was at. So I'm originally from Orlando, Florida. So I've lived in quite a few different places by now. While in Orlando, Florida, started sixth grade. Wasn't really sure what my interests were. I was involved in different things like cheerleading and stuff like that, but still trying to figure out who I was. Um, there was a lot of extra sixth graders at my school, so they developed a music appreciation class that the band director had to teach, and I was put into that class. I guess I don't really remember much about it, but this is what my band director tells me. We still talk. Um, he said I learned how to read music very quickly, like much quicker than he anticipated a sixth grader that, didn't demonstrate initial interest in music. I think I learned how to read music in like a month or something like that, and just was very interested. And we did a lot of listening, to different things and identifying what we were listening to. I eventually became his helper in class where I would help other students with like their theory homework. And at the end of the year, he went up to me and was like, "You're joining band next year." Like it wasn't even a negotiable conversation. It was like, "This is what you're doing next year, and you're gonna have a grand old time doing it." And I was nervous, but I said, "Okay, let's try something new." And when he asked me what instruments I was interested in, saxophone came to mind because my dad always really enjoyed listening to jazz. So he always played like Dexter Gordon and John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins. He also really enjoyed Kenny G too. And let's be real, we do appreciate Kenny G for making the saxophone as popular as it is. I know he gets some disdain from saxophonists in my community, but that introduced me to saxophone and what it was. And I thought it was a really cool instrument. I wanted to do it. And my band director told me, "Well, you're going to play clarinet for a year." So I played clarinet for a year and then transitioned into saxophone my eighth grade year of band. And by then, oh my goodness, I fell in love with the instrument. It was just, there was something about it that just brought me so much joy every single time I got to pull the instrument out and put it to my face and playing through it. It was a very cathartic experience for me. So it was almost like a no-brainer pursuing it in high school marching band. And then moving on into college really quickly. I initially thought that I wanted to pursue music for the rest of my life, but I was convinced otherwise to start doing something else because music isn't a real career, quote unquote. Um, and I started psychology and I hated it. And I was like a semester in and I was like, I can't do this. I miss playing my saxophone. I miss talking about music. I miss talking to other people about music. And I was hanging around the music majors a lot at my school and helping them with their theory homework. And they would all look at me like, "Alexia, why aren't you a music major? We're really confused right now." So that got me thinking, it's like, okay, well, now I need to make these decisions for me instead of just listening to what other people think I should be doing with my life. And second semester, switched it right on in music. And I think the rest is history from there.
I think one of the things I'm also a voice teacher, and I think we have that in common between teachers, that one or several great teachers in our career really like set us on track. And as teachers today, we think of these people. Isn't that
Yes.
true?
It is so true. I mean, you know, it's funny you mentioned that. And what I forgot to mention in my quick history story about my saxophone origins, that middle school band director was my first private saxophone professor in college. It was like a full circle moment for me. It was incredible to kind of see like that shift for us. And yes, even now when I work with students, because like I said, I teach all across the spectrum, K through 12, college, community students. And if I could be that person that that band director was for me for one person, I mean, I think you can agree with this too, Diane, that music has brought such joy in our lives and has changed us for the better. And we feel like we're really making this positive impact in our communities. And we want to like share the love, right? We want to pass it forward, if you will.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, so from this path, then you finish your studies, and then there is a point where you say, I need to become a teacher. I want to pass it on. I want to be this
Yeah.
impact person. When was this moment for you?
Um, I think it was halfway through my undergrad career. Um, I got this job. So I was working on my undergrad in saxophone performance at the University of North Florida. And out there, there's this private school known as the Episcopal School of Jacksonville. And my saxophone professor reached out to me at the time and said, "Hey, they're looking for a saxophone adjunct instructor. I think you would be really great at this." And I was nervous because I never taught before. I was like, "Sure, I'll try it, see if I like it." And I went to it. I taught my very first sectional. And even before going in, I went up to my professor, like pen and paper was like, what do I do? What do I do when they walk in? What do I do? How do I warm them up? How do I get them to play skit? Like, I was like, I don't know what to do. They're giving me 45 minutes to work with these 20 students, and I have no idea what to do with them. And he helped me to develop a whole plan from start to finish. And then I remember after that very first sectional, a student went up to me and she said, "Hey, do you teach privately?" And I lied and I said, "Yes." And she said, "Can you be my teacher?" And I said, "Sure, let's do it." And then I went back to the same professor after and I was like, "What do I do? How do I give lessons? How do I do this?" And I was so nervous because I was so afraid of failing. But looking back on it now, it was such an amazing experience because it showed me whenever that student gets that aha moment or that student gets that part right the first time or they can't play altissimo and all of a sudden it clicks for them because of the way I taught them how to do it. Just the happiness that it brought me of, oh my gosh, I just helped this student was amazing. And as I continued to teach, I went on and did my master's. And I continued. So I started developing my private lesson studio. I was teaching about 30 to 35 students a week while working on my master's, which was a little crazy looking back on it now. Don't know how I did that, but I did. I was going to several different high schools and middle schools in the Baton Rouge area when I wasn't in class or wasn't in rehearsal, going to those schools, working with those students. And that really jump started like, okay, I love doing this. This is something I'm really passionate about. I love getting students excited about the saxophone. I love getting students feeling like they're getting from point A to point B. Um, Something I struggled with a lot when I was working on playing in high school, I couldn't afford lessons. My family couldn't afford the lessons as much as I wanted to, and I totally understand why, because there is a cost associated with doing that kind of thing. But I felt like I was falling so far behind all of my peers, and it made me feel very inferior to them. And they never, intended to act that way towards me, but they were at this whole new level that I couldn't even comprehend. And I wanted to see what I could do to get there. So when I was becoming that teacher for that person and helping them get to those levels, and not just about playing an instrument, but about character development, giving them leadership opportunities, getting a student feeling more comfortable speaking in front of an audience. I mean, just those kinds of things that are so inherently woven into everything we do as musicians. That was the turning point for me of like, oh my gosh, I can change people's lives doing this thing. And it was very, very exciting. So I love doing it. And even today, as a quick example, I'm working on that spring musical with my K through second graders, and I have a second grader. There's some speaking roles in the musical. They're very small, and they're cute, like Dr. Seuss-esque rhyming things. Um, and I had a second grader just get total stage fright and started crying. And so I had to pull him aside and talk him through it and said, this feeling is normal. Like, you're going to be okay. I believe in you, all of those things, because he was the one that came up to me and said, Miss McLean, I want to have a role, but I'm so nervous going on stage. And I told him, I will help you get there. Because I was that shy kid who was afraid to talk to anyone. So I want to be able to help those students blossom out of their shell and really grow into themselves.
And today you do that also at university level with the ADI committees and things like that. Can you talk
Yes.
about that role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned I'm the director of mentorship for the NASA's Committee on Gender Equity. NASA is short for not space, North American Saxophone Alliance. We have a very clearly matching acronym. And I really do enjoy the work that I do with diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Something that I was quickly figuring out through my college years, and especially as I was starting to navigate my new disability, is that I am very much in the minority population. There's not a lot of representation, one, of female identifying saxophonists, and two, of disabled identifying artists. And I couldn't find my community. So I definitely felt isolated a lot in those aspects of my college experience. While I was working on my undergrad, it was definitely a boys' club, if you will. I was one of the few women in my studio that was playing saxophone. And there was some troubling times with that. And I know that a lot of people in my shoes can share some stories with that. But I think what it taught me is something had to change, something had to give. And I always tried to change something into an inspirational moment for myself because I want to be able to become a better version of myself. And also, again, that whole idea of paying it forward. Um, so I started to involve my efforts into gender equity esque kind of thing. So the North American Saxophone Alliance first started this committee. It was known as the Committee on the Status of Women, and they started it, I think 2016, 2017. No, maybe it was 2018. So it hasn't even been in existence for 10 years. And they wanted to address this very issue of the lack of female identifying or non-binary identifying saxophonists. And what can we do to get there? And I fill out a volunteer form immediately. And I was like, I want to be a part of this. I don't know how, I don't know what skill sets I can provide you to help you reach your goal, but I want to be a part of this because I think I found my community. And I surely did. Meeting with these women and these non-binary saxophonists who were doing these amazing things all over North America was so inspiring, and I wanted to become a part of that. So when I shifted my role into actually becoming a committee member, which was this past year, I was very excited when I got the call to be offered to lead the mentorship program because everything the mentorship program is, everything that they stand for is just everything I believe in. Wanting to support those emerging artists, wanting to give the support that maybe they don't have in their immediate communities, whether it's within their immediate college circle or, kind of beyond that, and giving them a vehicle to be able to figure out what their strengths are, what their passions are, what do they want to do with the work that they're doing. Because I think we, as musicians, are quickly realizing that as much as we would love to all be paid full time to only do our performances, we just don't live in that kind of world anymore. There's definitely an influx of musicians that are amazing, but it's hard, right? And we also need the folks like ourselves to be able to advocate for those who maybe not be able to advocate for themselves. So doing that has gotten me thinking a lot about just the landscape of what music looks like for us, what musicians' career fields look like. So when I first got out of college, and I'm just kind of backtracking a little bit, but I did my first job at LSU as their school of music admissions recruiter. So basically, my job was to be the person talking to the parents and saying, yes, your child can do a degree in music. Like, this is a very much doable thing. And yes, there is a job market. It's not the starving musician stereotype is just, it's not an accurate representation of our job market. And I remember one mom specifically went up to me at a fair and she said something along the lines of, "Can you please convince my child to not do a degree in music? She needs to be a doctor. She needs to make money." And I was so shocked that she was so blunt about it. And I tried really hard to combat that and say, no, I don't think that's the case. I'm actually a professional musician myself. But the mom was having none of it. She was like, nope, what you're saying is not true and all of that. So it got me thinking about, well, why does this mom feel this way? We always make the joke about the starving musician and we always joke about how we had to find like 32 gigs to be able to pay our rent, right? But why is that the case? Like, is it us? Is it the job market? Is it the general public? Is it a combination thereof? And I started to do some research on my part. The unemployment rates, and it's been a while since I've checked. This is pre-COVID. I would be interested to look at the data if it's changed since COVID has hit. But pre-COVID, when I initially looked at the data, the unemployment rate for musicians was like 3%. It was very low, and the highest percent of unemployment rates was actually engineer majors. The major that everyone was being told to go and pursue was one of the highest unemployment rates. Now, underemployment, totally different story, right? The underemployment rate is quite high for musicians, which actually got me thinking too, well, why is that the case? Like, are we just not educating the general public enough about the kind of work we do and why it's important? So I think the combination of those two things really kind of dove me into the work that I do. Because when I was going through college, my experience was very much teach, perform, or nothing. Like, there's no room for arts administration, there's no room for arts advocacy, there's no room for anything else but these two things. And I think that's kind of we've been putting our foot in our own mouths for quite some time, saying that these are the only two available career paths, because now we have this influx issue and the lack of support in other areas where we could be really beneficial, right? Working in a studio or working in an office that knows how to run a festival. The festival that I was mentioning that I did this past weekend, they told us they had keyboards. They were toy keyboards. They were not real ones, right? So just that kind of knowledge, like if there was a musician on site, a lot of that would have been fixed. So I think we need to give ourselves more credit than we are a lot of the time.
For sure. And
Yeah.
I would like to go back to your performer career now. So
Yeah.
as a performer, you also did a lot of very interesting things. So can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, definitely. So as a performer, I found myself really drawn to music that had meaning, if you will. Not that pieces of music don't have meaning, but the pieces that, had a really big meaning was something I was drawn to. I was always drawn to what the story was behind something. And the first one that kind of exposed me to that was Jacob Derveldus, if I'm saying his last name correctly, also known as Jacob TV. He's well known for composing music with backing tracks, so like electronic music. And the first one that I was exposed to during my grad degree was Grab It by Jacob TV. And if you don't know anything about the piece, or anyone who's listening to the podcast doesn't know, I'll give like a quick snippet of what it's about. It's for tenor saxophone with boombox, and the boombox is playing recordings of Jacob TV's interviews with prisoners that are serving life sentences and talking to them about what their experience is like in prison, what do they value in their lives. And what a lot of these prisoners were saying a lot of the time is, you got to grab life because you don't know when you're going to lose it. You don't know if tomorrow's going to come, all of these things. These things that sound so cliche to us, but to someone like, those individuals that got their freedom taken away, or they, couldn't have their freedom anymore for various reasons and have to think differently, right? They have to shift their perspective. Because at the very beginning, when you listen to this piece of music, you hear a lot of cursing and, the F-bomb is being dropped here and there. So a lot of people tend to give, oh goodness, I just lost the word. Like, they give less worth to the piece because of it when they initially listen to it. because it's like, oh, there's cursing in it. I don't like it. When in reality, it's just to kind of really represent the harshness of what these prisoners are trying to express. And it's a very cool piece of music. And I performed it at a NASA conference in, I think, Mississippi, like in 2019 or something like that. And that was like my first performance of something I felt really connected to because I always find, that when you go through these life experiences, it gets you to think about life differently, which I think is definitely a huge proponent of how I feel when it comes to navigating the disability that I had to start navigating a couple of years ago. And so that was really kind of like the jump start for my love for electronic music. So I started diving into that a lot more, finding different performance opportunities there. And then fast forward to starting to work in my arts administration work, I stopped playing. And I totally kicked myself in the butt for that because I got busy with my full-time job and I was like, oh, it's okay. The saxophone's over there. I'll play it later. And then COVID hit, and we were all forced to be at home forever, or it feels like forever, right? And I was constantly working because I was working from home. And I think, like with a lot of other individuals across the world, were finding themselves quickly burned out. So, needed to find a better way to dive my energy into this. So, I started doing multi-track videos. And I know those are a lot of what people see when they look at my YouTube channels, like, whoa, this is kind of different. And the reason I started doing that is one, I wanted a creative outlet. And two, there's something so incredibly nostalgic and amazing about like video game music and TV show music that I used to watch when I was a kid or used to play when I was a kid. There's something about it that just brings me such joy. It's almost like the nostalgic feeling. I think it's called frisson, if I remember correctly, that you get whenever you're listening to something that reminds you of like a beloved childhood memory. And yeah, so I started doing that and it got some traction and people were really liking it. And I was also thinking about it from the lens of, well, there's so much content out there online now, good and bad. Why don't I put out some stuff out there of like a really cool way that a saxophone can sound? Because the saxophone is such a versatile instrument. So I started making more. People were loving it. Now, I haven't made them in quite some time because I've been moving a lot and also navigating new life events. But my plan is once we move into our forever home, which we're hoping will be in the next 6 to 8 months, that we can rebuild our studio and then I can start recording again. But I really enjoyed that. And also, what I love about those videos is it's out there forever now. It's official video, and it also taught me a lot about video editing and mixing and mastering my music. And oh my goodness, we do not give enough credit to those audio engineers and those video editors. That is not easy to do, especially when I was doing it by myself. And I was giving myself a deadline of like, okay, I'm going to post a video every week. That was, yeah. So it was like finding the song, arranging it to be a saxophone quartet, playing it, recording myself, being happy with my recordings, and then playing against myself, which is a lot harder than it sounds, because you're playing that one track and then you have to get them all to match up. And then mixing, mastering it, then videoing myself it, and then advertise. Like it's crazy. So now I understand why people have managers to handle all of those things.
Wow, yes, and that's the amazing thing is that these covers, actually from this COVID time, we all found ways to uh, be creative
Yeah,
in this time that were really challenging, and uh,
absolutely.
so yeah, it's a good trace of whatever we were able to do during these times.
Yes, I know. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about some projects that you might do right now. So do you have specific projects that you want to highlight?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm very excited to share a meaningful project that I'm currently working on right now is a commission of a saxophone piece with electronics with the composer Jenny Watson. She currently lives in the UK. She's also a saxophone player and composer that's becoming pretty well known in the saxophone and woodwind community. And Together, we are working on creating a new piece of music that reflects my experience navigating a new disability, being in and out of the hospital in 2023, navigating medical trauma, chronic pain, um, finding a diagnosis, navigating, like just all of those things. So it's a very personal work. It's grounded in those themes of medical trauma, chronic pain, resilience, and transformation. So just to give a very quick synopsis of that story, um, I was navigating some underlying issues that I didn't know about, and I had COVID, and COVID exacerbated those issues and accelerated them. So I woke up one day and my bones died in my legs. So I had to get rushed to the hospital, and it took over 7 months to get a diagnosis because of medical gaslighting, doctors just not believing me, getting bounced around from one medical specialist to the next. I mean, just like the epitome of our good old United States healthcare system. And then I finally had to make the decision for myself to go to the Mayo Clinic. They were able to diagnose me and schedule a surgery, really a life-saving surgery for me within like 6 hours of me being at this hospital. Got the surgery done, and I had to learn how to walk again. It was a bilateral knee surgery. I had to learn how to stand up, sit down, go up the stairs, all of those things that we often take for granted. And so this commission isn't just about telling my story, although that's a very cathartic part of the process for me. It's also about opening a space for a dialogue on how our bodies shape our identities as artists, because we can't be an artist without being ourselves. And I think sometimes people lose sight of that. And I think that's why musicians also struggle with like personal identity, because we put so much of our identity into our artistry that we sometimes have a tough time like finding that good balance. And my hope is that it resonates with musicians and non-musicians and just listeners of all facets who don't often see themselves reflected in music shaped by health challenges or disabilities. So I'm really excited to premiere it and perform it in a way to both advocate and connect with different communities. We've even talked about trying to get it connected with a podcast that had nothing to do with music and everything to do with like medical trauma and things like that, just because what I navigated in 2023 was something I never thought I would navigate. And now that I have answers and that I'm moving towards a place of figuring out my new identity as myself as an artist and everything like that, um, I wish that I had a community that, or at least had others that I could identify with that could help me better navigate it, because I was treading such uncharted territory for a very long time. And I turned out that I had this like super rare thing that's only supposed to happen to cancer patients and all of that. So like whenever you're navigating a disability that is rare and rare enough to where I make a joke about this sometimes, where it's actually a true story. The Mayo Clinic took pictures and videos of the inside of my legs during my surgery to use for their medical research, because of the disease or the disorder that I'm navigating is like totally new territory for post-COVID patients. So I get to be like part of research, yay. But just working towards a space where we can have an open dialogue about this, because something I was mentioning, we were kind of talking about before the podcast started, is I had to start using mobility aids, and I was so ashamed of it. I was so incredibly ashamed of needing to use a rollator, needing to use a cane to get from point A to point B because of the way people looked at me. People look at me funny because I don't look like the quote unquote person, whatever that person is supposed to look like using a rollator. Um, I don't look like that person that the general like stereotype thinks, right? Whenever people see someone with a rollator, they typically imagine stereotypically, right? An older individual needing to use it. And I just didn't fit that bill. And that confused a lot of people. So people were quite judgmental. People even said some things under their breath to my face, all of the above. And it made me very ashamed. So if you take a very close look at some past pictures of me, you'll see like canes and rollators hiding in the backgrounds of my pictures, because I was afraid to show people that this is something that helps me to live my life better. And a lot of people tend to view mobility aids as a hindrance, like, oh, I'm so sorry you need that. And it's like, no, I'm so glad that I can use this because now I can walk farther or I can go and enjoy this thing. So I think just opening up that dialogue and trying to start to move past a place where we can talk about the issues and challenges that ableism presents on society and presents on who we are as artists, because there's definitely not enough representation there. If my commission can do that, that would bring me so much joy.
So when will that be performed?
Oh, goodness. Hopefully looking at the end of 2025, early 2026.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
Um, Speaking of community, we are both part of a community of professional musicians with disabilities, ROMPs. And so when did you discover ROMPs and what made you apply
Yeah.
and collaborate with this
Yeah.
organization?
I love Ramped. When did I find them? I think it was it was definitely after my surgery. So I think that's when I was like trying to seek a community. I started following a lot of disability advocates on Instagram because I just wanted to find a sense of comfort in whatever I was navigating, that I wasn't the only person dealing with it. But there was always that disconnect of like, well, all of these disability advocates, they are amazing. And they're very open in talking about whenever they have to deal with ableism and things like that, or just dealing with a new symptom or dealing with a new doctor. But what I kept falling short on was just the lack of, well, none of these disability advocates are artists. And I want to find that connection with someone. So I think I was Google searching disabled artists or something like that, and Ramped popped up on my thing. And I made myself a profile and I was like, you know what? This seems like a really cool thing. And I think, is his name Alex? Is he the operations officer or coordinator? He
Archer.
re Archer, thank you. Sorry, Archer, if you're listening. Archer reached out to me and said, hey, I would love to chat with you, have a conversation with you. And he was so awesome to talk to. Definitely made me feel like I belonged, gave me a sense of belonging, talked to me about everything Ramp was doing, and talked to me about what they believed it was important. And I found a sense of community. And ever since joining that, I got to meet you and some other composers that I started collaborating with. So there's this one composer that I started collaborating with. I believe they live somewhere in Europe, or maybe it was the UK if I remember correctly, and
Yeah.
just doing collaborations on that. So it's such a great way to meet new musicians and artists and just having something to connect over. Um, Again, finding your community is incredibly difficult at its best, and I don't think we are at its best when it comes to a disabled artist community. I mean, it was really difficult to try to find something, and then once I found Ramped, I was like, okay, I think I found a community that I could really relate to.
So this is a good segue to my next question, which is about the representation of disability in disability culture and why it is important. So you already replied a little bit to this question, but what is it for you to work in an environment that promotes accessibility in the arts and in disability culture?
Absolutely. And this is something I think about quite a bit, but thinking about this question in specifics, it definitely caused me to do some deep diving reflection upon myself on what it means to me. So with the arts, accessibility in the arts, I think is more about developing accessible, the blue handicap sign and ramps and closed captions and having an ASL interpreter. Like, I think it means more than that. I think it's about creating systems, expectations, changing stereotypes and relationships that makes participation possible for everyone, from students to performers to administrators, regardless of ability. Disability culture, I think, is really, and it's funny because when I first started navigating this disability, again, I think a lot of the same emotions that people deal with is feeling shame and all of those kinds of things. But disability culture should really be about embracing your creativity, adaptability, and deep insight that comes from navigating the world differently. It definitely causes you to see the world a little differently. And it's also not about being forced to separate my identity either. I'm a disabled person. I'm an artist. I'm both. Like, it's all within myself, right? So I think my lived experiences actually helps to level up my teaching ability, my performance ability, my leadership ability, because I look at life through a different lens now. And when we build art spaces where disability is recognized as a valuable perspective, not a deficit, right? Because I think that's something that folks are still having a tough time navigating. We can open the door to such a much more creative and vibrant ecosystem. Um, something that ramped, which I'm sure you already know about, talking about literally creating that ramp at the Grammys so that way performers, regardless of ability of walking up and down the stairs, can go on the stage at the same capacity as everyone else. Things that you didn't even realize were needed until you needed to have that access. I think those kinds of things are what we need to conversate more about.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I have a last question, which is about people who might have counted in your career or have showed you some paths that you are right now using. If you had to think of someone who motivated you or counted in you in this path of yours, who would it be and why?
Oh goodness, there's so many people. Um, and I know this sounds a little cliche or cheesy, but I'm going to have to give a quick shout out to my husband, Sean McLean. He is a full-time percussionist. So he's a musician as well. So he understands the ins and outs of the music community and everything like that. And he has been with me every single step of the way, whether it was taking me to doctor's appointments or helping me to figure out how to better advocate for myself or helping me to figure out what career pathway is the right fit for me. I think, your significant other, your life partner knows you better than you know yourself sometimes. So I'm very grateful for his support, because a lot of what he and I have done together, I think is a testament to that and that support. Because when you navigate new challenges in your life, you need someone to have that immediate support towards. Um, Shifting on to a more specific artist, a disabled artist, I think I have to say Lachi, excuse me. If you don't know her, she is the founder of Ramped. So Diane and I keep talking about Ramped, and Ramped is recording artists and music professionals with disabilities. She was the founder. And while I never really have spoken with her directly, the minute I discovered who she was, I felt instantly inspired and instantly like, oh my gosh, there is a space for us. There is a space for disabled artists to thrive, not just exist, but thrive. She is a powerhouse. Oh my goodness. She is a musician, disability advocate. Her visibility and leadership, I think, not only opened doors, but shifted the conversation around accessibility and representation in the music industry. And seeing someone so unapologetically herself, leading with disability pride while leading systematic change. Oh my gosh, it's inspired me and made me realize not only is there room for us, but like make room for us, please. Here we are. Like just having that confidence in ourselves and who we are, that we don't have to compromise our authenticity in our space to create an impact. And I'm really grateful for her work and that, even though I've never have personally had a conversation with her. Um, I've seen her do talks and performances and stuff. It's actually it's inspiring. It's breathtaking, honestly, to see the work that she does.
Well, the story that's launched Rumped is that, so I know her from before Rumped.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so when she started talking about uh, conversations with the Grammy Awards about accessibility and inclusion, then she realized she put some people together, and she's a co-founder actually because Gail Lee was also
Okay.
in that pack that founded Rumped at the very beginning. They both realized that when people wanted to meet artists with disabilities, they didn't know where to go. As you say, because of the lack of representation, and they were talking about it very well, we couldn't find anything. So they did a talk for the Grammys or for the Recording Academy, and at the end, the person says, "Oh, yeah, sure. we're gonna contact you back, and then we continue the conversation. Who is we? I mean, there is this musician, this musician, this musician. There is no we.
It
We
was
don't have an ensemble. We don't have an association. We don't have a coalition. So we should create that. And so they were both very, very excited about the fact that we needed to create that. And that's what started ROMT. And she's always been, very verbal and here present in the room. And when she's present in the room, she is not unnoticed, right? Everybody's
right.
turning the eyes toward her direction, and then she glows. I mean, really, like her cane. She uses glow cane. That's exactly it.
We
It
saw
goes
that. That is amazing.
matches her personality really. So yeah, she's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, she's really wonderful, and I'm very grateful for how authentic she is about herself, because I think authenticity is something that musicians sometimes struggle with. I feel like a lot of times when we try to represent ourselves outwardly, whether it's online or in a presentation or, even in a conversation like this, I feel like a lot of times we try to act how we think we should act instead of just being the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah, we should be
Yeah,
the best version of ourselves.
right, right. We are all different and important, and we all have something to contribute. So there's no need for all of us to try to act like the same entity that we think we need to be. Um, the world is constantly changing. So, I think disability has changed the way I move through the world, but I think it's also deepened my commitment to inclusion and given me new tools for connection and resilience. So I want to continue to build those communities where people can feel seen, and not in spite of their differences, but because of them. So that's why, going back to Lachi, it's amazing to see the work that she does. When it's when it's something as simplistic as, hey, check out this amazing outfit that I'm wearing at this awards ceremony. I think, what I don't remember what she posted recently, what she was at, but I was like, oh my gosh, that dress, everything, just from head to toe, just amazing. Like you said, when she walks in a room, she's there. Everyone knows she's there.
And it's this kind of advocacy for musicians with disabilities today, and it's really important, especially now, right? Especially now that we live in that kind of world where we look at each other and say, "How did that happen?"
Right. Yeah,
So,
and we live in such a digital world now that we might as well just take this and run with it, right? Start to put onto paper, literally and figuratively, that this is the pathway we want to go in.
well, thank you so much for this lovely conversation. It was really, really interesting. And
Thank you.
yeah, I think we will see each other at another round event
Oh, yes,
sometimes.
absolutely. Many, many coming forward. But thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful for this space to share my journey as all of the above, musician, educator, advocate, navigating a disability. Um, and if I could leave like a quick message to those listening, is that we don't have to separate our artistry from our advocacy. They can coexist. They can feed on each other and can inherently make our work much more powerful. So I'm excited to keep learning and collaborating and pushing towards a better version of myself, whatever that looks like. And I hope that others can do the same. So again, thank you so much for having me, Diane. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, and see you soon.